Hello, welcome to the Graduation Equity Webinar Series. I'm Kefi Andersen. I'm a System Improvement Program Supervisor Lead. And today we are talking about the power of youth co-design. This meeting is being recorded and it should be available immediately on YouTube. There's closed captions available in the menu if you want to take advantage of that. And we'll be dropping the PowerPoint in the chat, and it's also available on our webpage. This webinar is brought to you through the Office of Student Engagement and Support within the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. At OSPI, we believe each student needs to be prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. The Graduation Equity Webinar Series was created with the purpose of highlighting practices that increase access to education and ultimately to graduation. Through our webinars, we're striving to go beyond equality and to think about the opportunities that we have to examine and dismantle current policies and practices that result in disparate outcomes for our students, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that each student has access to the instruction and the support that'll make them successful in school and in life. We live in a really beautiful place, and I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the lands of the Squaxin Island, the Coast Salish, the Cowlitz, and the Squally tribes. This time of year, I see the return of goldfinches and rabbits. We have flowers on our trees, promising fruit later this summer. I'm hoping that you're getting a chance to get outside and enjoy the beauty of nature this time of year. We ask that the participants of this meeting honor the traditional lands on which each of you are located today. And if you're not sure, we have some links in the chat that are in our resource page that you can check out to find out where that is. Let's look in the chat. I see Snohomish, Yakima, Kootenai, Salish, Squaxin, Spokane, Squally, Gallup, Muckleshoot, Quileute, Cowlitz, Spokane. Awesome. It's great to see you all this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still live here today. So glad that you're here. And I want to encourage you each to connect with our Office of Native Education to learn more about tribal consultation. I know as a teacher, I always wanted to learn more, but I never felt like I had a really good entry point. And this could be yours. Summer is a really great time to travel the state and learn about the tribes in your area. Feel free to email me and I'll get you connected. I think that this month, when we're talking about youth co-design, I know that I have learned a lot about this topic just in making this webinar. For me, you know, I always thought about it as mutual decision making, or at least being asked for a vote. And I think with voting isn't always enough. You know, if your idea isn't a part of the decision making process, then it can feel token-like. And for me, I know that the classes I enjoyed the most, my teachers took the time to get to know me and to make the content relevant to me and to involve me. And as someone who works, I know I've had decisions made about my job that I wasn't involved in that had huge implications for what happened to me. And I think when we talk about co-design, we're bringing it back to a community and how we feel about one another and how we sit in power. And so this is definitely an equity issue of who gets to make the decisions that affect one another's lives. So I hope today that our webinar will help you think about decision making a little bit differently, and also invite you to suggest practices. We hope you walk away from today's webinar knowing more about a model for youth co-design. We'll get you some ideas from some model program practitioners. We have a project from ESD 105's Migrant Education engagements. And we have one from DCYF, Family Youth Services. And we'll have resources to get you started. So if you want to check those out, they'll be there. I'm joined today by my colleague, Francesca Matias. She is our Youth Engagement Administrative Program Specialist. And she's brought with her Sam Martin. He's the CEO and head lobbyist at SDM Consulting. And we'll tell you more about Sam in just a minute. Also, just a friendly reminder, this is our last webinar for this school year. We are going to start back up in August, and we have a link to re-register for the next school year. So if you found our webinars helpful and you want to check out what we have going, in August, we are going to talk about setting up your school and classroom for belonging. That'll be August 9th, and this link is going to be in your resource sheet. Let's get to know you. I'm going to launch a poll here, and you can tell us a little bit about your role and what grade band you're serving and how familiar you are with youth co-design. And for folks who want it, the resource page and the slides are in the chat. So if you want to take a moment and copy those over for yourself so you can check them out, they are there. Thanks, Jocelyn. And it looks like we have quite a few school counselors, district office staff with us this morning. Welcome. And we've got a good number of administrators as well. A lot of high school, middle school people, or people who cover both. And people feel somewhat familiar with this topic, so that's really cool. I feel like we can get kind of deep on this. It looks like, yeah, like about the majority. So I'm gonna share this poll back with y'all so you can see it. If you want to look at the numbers yourself, and if you didn't get to participate, that's okay, no problem. So we're gonna go to Francesca. And Francesca, you're going to tell us some of the ideas of co-design.
Thank you, Kefi. Good morning, everybody. Happy to join you all from the Squaxin Island traditional lands. A lot of you probably have heard the term "nothing about us without us," and that's really the essence of what co-design is. It's an approach to designing with, not for people. And it's an approach to designing with people and communities, and it amplifies the voices and experiences of the people closest to the needs addressed. It also prioritizes relationships. It increases trust through all involved in the design process, and uses participatory approaches to ensure the work is guided by those who are most affected. It's also about challenging the imbalance of power held by individuals who make important decisions for others. There is usually little to no involvement from students or young adults, yet that is the population most impacted by these decisions. And so there's a lot of great resources out there on co-design. A lot of what I will be sharing comes from Beyond Sticky Notes, a really great book that is authored by Kelly and McKercher. I highly encourage you to check out their website. They not only offer the book, but they do live trainings, which I just attended recently. Really great source of material. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Hart's ladder of youth participation. And when we look at this ladder, co-design is at the very top. And even though the goal with youth engagement isn't to immediately go to the top of the ladder, when we continually create and improve systems, we eventually can reach that top rung of shared decision making with youth or students. So there are different design approaches. We have designing at people, designing for people, designing with people, and led by people. And designing with people is where co-design fits in. When we look at this table here, you know, when you think about design, look for keywords such as designing with people would be co-design, participatory design, and where the power is held in that is, again, people or youth with lived experience are sharing decisions in the design process. This is really a great table to have. So if you're ever unsure where your work falls in, this might be a good source to keep, whether printed off at your desk or bookmarked. Lets you know where it's, you know, where you fall in the design process. So what is the goal of co-design? The goal is really our mindsets, which is how we are being, our methods, which is how we are doing, and then the social movements around it, how our systems embrace participation of youth with lived experience. And then there are principles behind co-design. We have sharing power, where we must share power in research, decision-making, design, delivery, and evaluation. We want to prioritize relationships. Co-design isn't possible without relationships and trust among the designers. And trust cannot be bought, it can be earned. The better the social connection, the better the process and outputs of co-design. Using participatory means. So those are approaches, participatory approaches are not about relaying information or just giving presentations. It's about facilitating self-discovery and moving those with lived experience from participants to active partners. And we want to build capacity. In co-design, everyone has something to teach and something to learn. As I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of my source comes from Beyond Sticky Notes. And in the book, they recommend the co-design team works best in 3 parts. We have, of course, the youth with lived experience, the professionals, which in education framework, that would likely be teachers, supervisors in the school, and then provocateurs. So they are outside of the context of what you're working in. They don't necessarily have lived experience or professional expertise. So how that might look like would be outside organizations or community leaders. And of course, it's natural for some change in membership when working with people, especially those with complex lives. We want to be flexible working with youth, and it's possible to do co-design broken down in chunks because they are students and they have school and extracurriculars. So I'm honored to present Sam Martin, CEO of SDM Consulting, who will do a much deeper dive into co-design.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and I appreciate the kind of introduction to co-design and the structure. And so we'll talk a little bit about centering lived experience and how that can even play a role in some of the work that you all are doing today, and how we've seen it play out in other co-design processes that we've done. And we're really excited too, even a little bit later with the panel that you'll hear. We've partnered with some really great partners as well as state agencies to be able to really do this work in an intentional and impactful way. And so we're excited to be able to talk about all of that with you all today. All right. Again, I'm Sam Martin, CEO of SDM Consulting. Really excited to be able to discuss this work with you all. So who are we? What is SDMC? Our origin really started in the policy space, but as we kind of grew and saw the importance of policy work and how to keep community at the center of policy work, we realized that it's much bigger than just legislative advocacy, right? And so we've really expanded our work to be able to talk about and impact and bring community in and lived experience in from the beginning, the creation of policy, all the way through to the direct implementation and impact of that policy on communities. We're really intentional about keeping lived experience at the forefront. And as you saw in some of the slides before from Francesca, how do we continue to find dynamics to shift power on its head? I'll say one of the things that we really do as well is focus in on not just the policy as I talked about, but service design. We also we develop trainings and curriculum for community members as well, and professional development trainings also. Let's talk a little bit more about co-design. As you heard, it really is about amplifying those voices and experiences of the people closest to the need, prioritizing those relationships, and increasing trust across stakeholders. Sharing power with lived experience across the continuum. One of the biggest pieces that we really try to stay grounded in is how do we bring folks in at the beginning, but also what happens after the traditional process? How do we continue to keep those voices engaged? Part of what is the most important, what are the most important pieces of the process is shifting our minds and our mindset. One of the values that we'll talk about is being in the gray, right? But we all have to kind of shift our mindset to be open-minded to this process. It oftentimes isn't traditional. It isn't conducive to the norm. It's something that we've done that hasn't been done a lot. I'm gonna move forward because you saw that slide already. Part of co-design and one of the important pieces of the process is staying grounded in equity and diversity, staying grounded in bringing a plethora of experiences to the table, and being intentional about that. In some of the co-design work we've done, we've been thoughtful about bringing in voices from all across the state, bringing in perspectives from all across different ages, different races, ethnicities, LGBTQ plus experiences, a variety of different things, and really being thoughtful about how all those experiences can ultimately enhance what we're making together. Some of the other important pieces around this is the kind of participatory research, the human-centered design mixed in with the co-design. Being human-centered really requires us to be focused on the people that we bring to the table. And part of what that looks like is providing support for them as well too. One of the things that we do in our partnership with DCYF, and you'll hear from Lily Cory a little later, we provide engagement support for our participants. If there are barriers, we try to remove those barriers, whether that be paying for childcare, paying for internet, technology challenges or barriers, right? We do our best to accommodate the people that we are engaging in this process, thus keeping them really at the center of our design. And being able to do things like gather information, do focus groups, do surveys, being expansive in how we capture information to be able to really keep those voices at the center of our conversations. There's really 6 mindsets for co-design: elevating lived experience, being in the gray, valuing many experiences, curiosity, hospitality, and learning through doing. I really wanted to uplift and highlight being in the gray. Part of what this process requires is to be a little bit uncomfortable. It requires folks to not necessarily know what we're going to come up with at the end. It's really hard to launch in these processes because folks oftentimes have a vision of what the finish line should look like, but you have to throw that out. You have to really be open to creating something new together. And oftentimes what we see and what we've experienced has been the different groups that are brought to the table, as Francesca brought up earlier, those provocateurs, the lived experience, and those systems professionals. Those ideas that come together oftentimes inform each other or are more similar than different more times than not, right? And being able to hear from systems professionals when you're talking to lived experts, it really enhances the conversations that lived experts had. We've had times where we brought in what systems professionals say, and lived experts are like, wow, we didn't even realize that this was a problem. We didn't know that this was a challenge. We should definitely do something about that. Vice versa, right? Hearing from lived experience, folks with lived experience, bringing that back to systems professionals and saying, well, why are you making me go to a training that you've never even been to? Why are you making me do something that you don't even have experience with? And that was just something that me and Lily were talking about earlier today, right? And so we really are being thoughtful and intentional about how we build out these programs, these systems, these models, because we're using all the opinions and perspectives to inform each other. And we're being thoughtful about how we're bringing folks to the table together. We've worked to be able to develop what's called the Co-Design Institute. One of the things that has been, that can easily happen is that things can kind of snowball into, and not oftentimes, but sometimes they can not necessarily stay grounded in the values. As we talked about with earlier, the model that we've been using or have been grounded in is the one from Beyond Sticky Notes. And in an effort to be able to help to stay grounded in that and help systems professionals and partners be able to do this work in an intentional way, we developed the Co-Design Institute to be able to continue to be learners. When we did our research in the co-design, we found that it actually originated in the 1970s in Europe, really grounded in the kind of in workers' rights and being able to bring workers to the table to talk about what they're experiencing on the front line in the factories and things like that, right? And so that has really grown and snowballed, but we haven't really seen that a ton here in the States. And so we wanted to be able to have a place where we can all continue to be learners, develop and create a repository of information, and being able to help others be able to engage in this work. And I can say for myself, as someone who has been on the other side of this process, knowing what it feels like to be tokenized can be really challenging, right? And so we really wanted to be thoughtful and stewards of how do we engage lived experience in a thoughtful and intentional way, knowing from direct experience what it feels like when that doesn't happen, right? And so that's really some of the intent behind the Co-Design Institute, and I'm happy to share more information with folks as needed. When we think about engaging young people in this process, part of my professional background, I've also worked in schools as well too. I used to actually be an education specialist with Treehouse. I know some folks are familiar with Treehouse as well too. And so working directly with young people in middle school and high school was very, very, it was very impactful and important work. One of the things that I really learned in that process is that young people's voices are really not brought to the table for things like 504s, IEPs, all types of things like that, right? And I think that there's when we think about co-design, it's really just expanding those principles of how we bring young people to the table. And so when we start with the co-design process, we look at building conditions, right? And so we start with who are the right people for this work? Who are we bringing to the table? Who are we working with and what matters to them, you know? And that's really being able to do things like building out our model of care when we come together, being able to talk about why we're at the table. In our next phase of the process, we dive into that immerse and align. And part of that is really finding that guiding light to be able to figure out why we're all to the table together. It's that end goal that we're hoping to reach and understanding the parameters of what brings us to the table. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes there are parameters to the work that we do when we're doing co-design. We're building a program, but we have a certain amount of time. You have 6 months. You can only spend a certain amount of money, things like that. And so it's important to be able to prepare our co-designers with the true parameters of the work and the limitations that we have so that they can make informed decisions. Oftentimes, I think we neglect to tell young people about the true limitations because we feel as though they won't respond well to that. Our experience has been different. We've seen youth and young adults respond really well to being given all the information and still being able to make informed decisions. Then we get into our discovery phase, which is really talking about the information at the table. What do we need to understand and learn? That building capacity piece that Francesca talked about a little bit. Then we really shift into our design phase, being able to build together. What are we building? What are we building on top of? Test and refine is that next piece, being able to, like, if it's a pilot, testing the pilot, if it's launching a new program, whatever it is, and then being able to refine it. And then that implementation and learn phase, that phase that's how do we keep the engagement of the people who've been at the table for this process? How do we continue to bring them along in the process, whether that be building an advisory group, whether that be quarterly town halls where we engage community and host them in our schools and let them know about the things that we've been working on and how the program's doing, whatever that might look like, right? One of the other really cool pieces about this process is the team that you can bring together for co-design. Being able to, as we say here, Avengers Assemble, right? We have conveners, right, who are those who are bringing the group together. Oftentimes the ones who are facilitating the conversations when we're in our co-design sessions. We have our design coaches, the person who really helps to keep our mind on those parameters and thinking about how are we designing in the ways in which we need to be able to meet the requirements that are asked of us. our coordinator who's being able to help with scheduling, keeping people at the table, keeping people informed about what's going on, those kind of things. Our community connector. We talked a lot about being able to provide barrier removal. One thing that's really important and to understand is that when you're engaging folks with lived experience, real life is going to happen. And one of the things that we've seen in our past has been that we fire lived experts for the same reasons that we hire them, because life got real, because life got challenging, and they got activated, things happened. And we believe that being able to have that community connector in the room really allows for that if there's a concrete need, we can meet that. And we have our healer to be able to also support people whenever they are activated, to be able to provide that direct support to folks. Even if it's virtually, sometimes we'll pull folks off into a breakout room or talk to folks on the side in the chat, whatever it is to be able to address a person's need, we do our best to be able to meet that need. And we are flexible with these roles. Sometimes I'm the convener, sometimes I'm the healer, right? And so it also requires us to be in the gray and remain adaptable. We also truly believe in the compensation of lived experts. You can't ask people to come to the table and not pay them. And so we really try to work within the parameters that we have to pay lived experts as much as possible and to maximize that. We would pay consultants, we would pay professors, we would pay a ton of other folks to come to the table to be able to talk. And oftentimes they get paid handsomely, right? But we won't pay the folks who oftentimes can really inform the process more directly than someone who's coming from some other place and doesn't even know the true dynamics of what we're experiencing here or what the young people are experiencing on a day-to-day. And so just to be able to talk a little bit more about kind of what each of these steps of the process looks like. When I talked about earlier, building those conditions, we talked about our model of care and who's coming to the table. We've oftentimes seen, in co-design groups where we've engaged with experts, we ask them who should be in the room. Can we have state agency folks here? Can we have community members here? And it's up to them to decide how they're comfortable with who's in the room. We talk to them about how we share information. We never share direct personal information, but how should we disseminate the information and the suggestions and recommendations that come from our sessions? We talk a lot about that and hold the space for not just lived experts, but our provocateurs, who are our stakeholders, as well as our assistant professionals. That model of care, as I just talked about, recognizing that there's no normal also, and that we try to, when we say safe space, it's not just that, folks can just say whatever and it's and that's just okay, right? It's really about creating a space of support and creating a space of being able to allow everybody to feel comfortable, right? And so that is, it's necessary to be able to have a very positive and comfortable environment for our co-designers as they engage in these spaces. Then we get into our next phase, which is immerse and align, right? Identifying the gaps in knowledge, starting to talk about how we can reinforce and lean into our model of care, figuring out what the parameters are of the work that we're doing. This also allows us to be able to think big picture and long term. Part of one of the other important pieces of the next phase, and an important piece of the discovery phase, this is really being able to build capacity. We've been able to do things like disseminate data from reports for young people and for lived experts to be able to talk about conversations in a way that, again, feels very informed and intentional. We've been able to build out tools to be able to allow them to be able to engage in the information themselves, providing all types of research. We have a research team that has been able to do national scans and look at other programs that are comparable and things like that as well too. And again, being able to bring in experience to the table as well too. We've brought in folks to be able to talk to our lived experts, to be able to explain it and break down things that so that they can, you know, understand the context that we're or the situation that we might be in. One of the recent co-design sessions that we're in right now, we've been put up against a very tight timeline, right? And it was totally the antithesis of what we talked about as at the onset, right? We talked about being able to do this process for a longer time throughout the year and engage them throughout the process. And we ended up having to, because of deadlines, we had to come up with a product way faster than we expected. But we brought in the folks who could explain that. We helped to work with our co-designers to be able to help them make the decisions that need to be made right now. And while not happy about it, they were still able to engage in the process. The design phase, again, being able to build out whatever it is that we're hoping to build in a very intentional and thoughtful way. One of the things that I just was kind of highlighting too is that we want a co-design process to actually go the time that it's designed to go. We actually think that it takes about 2 years to do this process in a very thoughtful and intentional way. Oftentimes, as you all know, we are hit with deadlines that are much shorter. You have 3 months, you have 6 months, that kind of thing, right? And so we know that it's not always possible to do it in the way that we want, but we still don't think that that's a reason to not do the process, or at least attempt to do the process. And again, there may be times where you have to design and launch something, but can continue to engage folks throughout the process or post the process. Part of that testing and refine phase is also being able to share responsibility with co-designers. And so if you're launching a new program and maybe have to launch an RFP or, find contract support or something, why not bring in co-designers to review some of those things as well too? Why not include them in that process? They help to build it, so they should also be a part of the process to be able to help to find the person that you're going to contract with, or to be able to help to find whatever new service that you want to bring into the school, helping them to decide on who we want to bring in, those kind of things. Learning on parallel levels too, right? Part of this process requires everybody to be learners too. And so some of the things that we might be teaching lived experts might also be things that we're teaching provocateurs or stakeholders from the community as well too. And again, being able to bring people in together on the details. And then that last piece, continuing, that I oftentimes refer to as that CQI work, that continuous quality improvement. But it's being a little bit more intentional than that. There should be a way for anybody who gives feedback to a program or service, for that feedback to reach the designer of the program or service, right? And so even if it's just a parent walking in and saying, hey, I had a really good time, or at that after school activity with my kid, I thought it was great. I feel like we really had a breakthrough in their development, right? That feedback should be heard to the designers of the program, in the same way that someone might say, oh, I didn't necessarily feel like that quite met our needs. I would really like it if you did this instead. Those type of things, even if it's just coming in to the front office and saying it, right? Like, there has to be ways to start to capture that information so that folks know that their voices are being heard. Now, that's not necessarily something you can do on day one, but it is something that, you can be thoughtful about how to build out as you go into the future. Which again brings me to my kind of last couple slides, and my last point here is there are tools and things that you can even practice and implement today to be able to start to build out values of co-design. It's not to say, one, it's not necessarily just that you have to adhere to that model. We believe in kind of having the values of co-design integrated throughout our organization, and want to help to have others do that as well too, right? How are we continuing to provide or capture that feedback and that information? Some of the things that you can do there are, activities like journey mapping that allow young people to be able to talk about their pathway, what they experienced, and their individual story. There are ways to be able to share decision-making responsibilities, right? And to be able to create the space for them to have informed impacts and decisions. Engagement in CQI, right? Like we talked about it, finding ways to be able to bring them along in the process, whether that be looking at the final report or the annual report, whether that be looking at candidates for the position or whatever it is. Level setting, right? Continuing to provide easy to read data. We work in the policy space a lot. I would not hand a 8th grader a legislative bill in its just traditional form. That is not the way we should go about it, right? We really should think about how we can break that information down and deliver that in a way that is intentional. And frankly, it's not just for young people that we have to do that for, right? Like I have a hard time reading bills, right? And so we all need that support, right? Advocacy. We know that being able to advocate for the things that you want is something that is a big part of this process. It doesn't just come from thin air, right? And so being able to figure out how to engage young people in that process and to build up their advocacy skills is going to be really important. And over the last 5-10 years, we've seen tremendous amounts of amazing advocacy from young people all across our country. And keeping people at the table, finding a way, right? Finding ways to be able to keep them at the table, even if it's in an advisory role, right? And to be clear about that, as I alluded to earlier, right? Young people understand when you're clear about what their role is. Hey, this is an advisory board. It doesn't have necessarily decision-making power, but you are at the table and we do our best to take in these perspectives and these experiences, right? And so those are just some tools that you can start even today to practice to be able to start to implement values of co-design. I have talked a lot. Here's my contact information. Thank you all so much for indulging me and hearing, some of the things that we've learned and talked about in regards to co-design. And again, if you have any questions, happy to answer those. And I think you should stay and listen to my colleague Lily because she can complement and talk a little bit more about how we've worked together as state agency and external partner in our co-design work as well too.
Thank you so much, Sam. Everybody, if you can use your reaction buttons, let's show Sam some love. Amazing ideas this morning and just thinking about all of the opportunities that people have, I think, to work more in a transformational way instead of transactional. I mean, I think about all of not just with youth, but with our community members and taking these principles wherever they're going. So thank you so much, Sam. And yeah, let's talk with Lily. Let's talk with our panel. But first we're gonna go to our Q&A. So, and I don't see any questions in there yet. But if people have questions, let's give you a second to put some in there as well. Seeing kudos in the chat for you. Okay, we've got one in there for you, Sam. Where do strengths fit into co-design?
Yeah, I think we really try to be strengths-based in general. I think one of the things that, to kind of talk a little bit about some other work that we've done and do, we've recognized that, especially when working with young people in their adolescence, we oftentimes want to take not just a human-centered approach, but a healing-centered approach. And so building off of that kind of trauma-informed practice of that kind of, what has happened to you or kind of what's wrong with you, but to what's right with you. And so from the very onset, we really try to build out strengths and allow people to identify their strengths as well too, and what they think they contribute and can bring to the table. And so that I think it fits in at the start and throughout the process is being strength-based and strengths-focused.
So, It looks like we've covered it pretty well. Thank you, Sam, again. And we'll keep going here. So as part of our program, usually we want to see, okay, so we know kind of the big ideas behind it. What does it look like in real life? So we have brought with us today, we have Sam's partner, Lily Cory. Lily is an adolescent programs co-design manager for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. She is passionately committed to the voices of those impacted by state systems. She's a foster alum. Lily has worked directly with young people through her volunteer work as a guardian ad litem in Pierce County, and as a caseworker for behavioral rehabilitation services, as well as the Indian Child Welfare Act. And after receiving their master's of social work degree from the University of Washington, they've worked to reform the child welfare systems in Washington and nationally. Lily has broad experience working in systems change through their work with the Center for Children and Youth Justice, the Mockingbird Society, Partners for Our Children, and the United States Senate. When not working, Lily loves to garden, hike, dance, and snuggle with their fur babies. Welcome, Lily. We also have with us Cindy Cholico. Cindy is a dedicated advocate for underrepresented population in the Yakima Valley, with over 16 years of experience in supporting their needs. She's deeply passionate about helping those who require assistance, and her work reflects this commitment. As the Migrant Education Program Manager at ESD 105, Cindy is a tireless advocate for migrant students and their families. Her focus is on improving regional systems that help prepare migrant students for responsible citizenship, productive employment, and a lifetime of learning. She's committed to ensuring that all students, regardless of their background or circumstances, have access to the resources and support that they need to succeed. Outside of work, Cindy enjoys spending time with her husband and 2 daughters. She also loves to travel, explore new places, and experience different cultures. Welcome to Cindy. We also have with us Claudia Figueroa Dominguez. She's a migrant family engagement and student leadership coordinator, also from ESD 105. She works with Cindy. She has experience working with low-income, first-generation minority students and families for over 10 years. She brings a wealth of experience in early Head Start, migrant seasonal Head Start, and migrant education program. As an advocate for families working in a role that specializes in building trust, Claudia has learned that family engagement is a collaborative effort to establish positive relationships with families, to be part of the education journey for their kids. She believes the families are the child's first and most influential educators, and she provides professional development opportunities to strengthen parenting abilities and provide access to knowledge and skills to encourage positive environments and school readiness. She is a first-generation graduate and holds a BA in World Language and Cultures with an emphasis in Spanish and a Human Development minor. She's a Mexican immigrant who enjoys cake decorating and exploring the beautiful Pacific Northwest with her husband and 3 children. Welcome, Claudia. And I think we're gonna, let's talk about what this looks like in real life. So I think we're probably going to start here with Cindy. Cindy, your project in ESD 105 is designed to support migrant youth and families. Can you tell us a little bit about what the project was designed to do and the structure of it?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for having us. I love joining webinars, your GATE webinars, so I'm excited to be here today. So just to give you a little background, I did want to share what the Migrant Education Program is, just for those that might not be aware. So the Migrant Education Program is a federal program, and it's the Title I, Part C. The Migrant Education Program addresses the special needs of mobile farm working children. And the program provides supplemental support to students whose parents are migratory workers and or participate in traditional seasonal migration to obtain seasonal or temporary employment in agriculture and fishing and forestry. And so our goal in the program is really to support our students academically to ensure that they have all that they need. And of course, our hope is that they graduate with their high school diploma or a GED. And we just want to ensure that they are prepared to be citizens in our communities and continue to build their education and learning throughout their lives. So a little bit about our youth co-design is that thankfully we were able to propose to OSPI and the Migrant Education Program a innovative project because we felt in our ESD 105 region where we are the south central area of the state, we wanted to create an opportunity to bring our students together and have a conference specifically targeted for them. We wanted to help them build community across our region and just have a sense of belonging. As you can imagine, a lot of our migrant students that do move because of the work, they do miss out on so many opportunities in school and just building relationships and learning about community supports and services. So we thought that this would be a really great way to build connection and just get to know each other, right, in this capacity. So in 2019, we were going to launch our conference, but because COVID hit, we actually started out virtually. So we didn't want to do this conference without it being student driven. So what we started with was a student leadership club. And I want to give a shout out to all of our ESD 105 migrant districts, because without them, we couldn't have done this work because they have that, connection to the students and families. And so they were able to help us throughout this process. And so we started a leadership club, which was, as you can imagine, at the time during COVID, everything was shut down. We thought kids aren't going to be interested, but it was the total opposite. They were really excited to Zoom on, learn from other kids. They were meeting students from different areas from our region that they didn't even know were a part of the migrant education program. And so, so we started just building relationship, building trust with them, doing really fun and engaging activities. Even though they were virtual, we got to really know who they were and found that a lot of the students had a lot of commonalities. So even from where their parents were born, food that they enjoyed, hobbies that they had. So it was really cool to just see them share and provide that insight that, it's really important to build right away. So when we started this student leadership club, we just provided different activities around what they wanted to learn about, what are some needs that the students were facing. So we did a lot of different activities around, Zoom polls, like what are some of the things that you would like to learn about using polls, using surveys. We even did some virtual games just to kind of get to know what some interests were. And so our hope with this conference, and actually our conference is this Friday, it's our first time we're going to have it in person. And so we are so excited, and the students helped us throughout this whole process. The first 2 years, our conference was virtual, which we still had really great presenters, really good turnout, but students were ready to meet in person. So I'll have Claudia share a little bit about the work that we did this year with our student leadership club and how it moved into a student planning committee. And so Claudia, if you want to share just a little bit about our design.
So a little bit of the structure and design of building that rapport and building that community within ourselves was just starting off activities with, let's get to know each other, have different activities of a little bit of identity. Who are we? What's our background? Where's those common things? And I can say, like, at the very start, one of our activities was like, what's your favorite song? And everyone suddenly forgot what their favorite song was. Like, no one could think about what their favorite song was. And then as we progressed, we did start over Zoom, just because some of our students expressed, like, I am doing winter sports, so can we do something in the evening after I get out? Or I'm picking up my siblings, so I need something in the afternoon. And because we're not at the district level, we were like, well, we need a space to bring all these kiddos in, and Zoom worked out perfect for that. As the weather permitted, the students were like, hey, when are we going to start meeting in person? I want to get to meet everyone in person. So we found a space here at our building at ESD 105. And then the students were finally like, oh, can you put on whatever music they were interested in? And it was interesting just to see how they were connecting around music, even just around like having food when we're together. And it was really nice to see the progress of the students now feeling really comfortable with each other, and then with us facilitating and having their, like Cindy also said, their migrant student advocates that were helping, making sure they got the transportation to and from, and that they were able to do all those logistical things of getting them to us. So they have, all of this has been student led. They have decided on the venue of where they wanted to have the student conference. They decided on the dates of when they thought would be best. They decided on the food. And then especially like what topics do you want covered? And for that, we did bring in our professionals, our migrant student advocates, to be like, well, what do you see at schools? Because sometimes like the kiddos might not see the perspective like, oh yeah, I do need that. So we started off with like making connection with the districts, like what do you see at your schools that students might be needing? And then we brought that information to the students, and then they voted on like, yes, this is what we need. Like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't really sound that interesting. So they came up with the list of topics, and then that's where then we came in and to make the partnerships with our community, like who can be the presenter or who can bring in the materials for this event. So it came out to be a really mental health focused kind of workshops, and a little bit of identity, a little bit of just career readiness was another large one. So we are targeting 8th through 12th grade students, and those are the ones that made up our committee. And then we're going to be doing a big celebration at the end too, acknowledging all of our graduating migrant seniors, acknowledging all the students that did participate in our committee, and then acknowledging parents, because without their partnership, we wouldn't be able to be celebrating those seniors and those students' hard work.
That's awesome. I mean, I love that it evolved from being like a collection of people to more of a community, carrying that into the continuation of it. I mean, like, and is your structure, like, is that an ongoing structure, or is it like, we're going to do this conference this year and it's done, or is it going to be every year?
We do hope that it is every year. We do have to submit every year for those innovative funds, but this is our third year, our third annual conference. So we do hope that it continues as we see our group growing a little bit more.
Awesome.
And we also want to provide a structure, so if our districts in our area want to use this framework to create those opportunities in their own buildings, we also, want to, so if we don't get the funding, we could at least give them the information of how we got things started and how it helped and what we learned, because we've learned a lot throughout this journey. Like, there's some things that we are like, let's do this, let's get it going, but students are not interested, then we don't want to, go that route. So adults have great ideas, but if the students aren't going to buy in, then it's not worth it. So we've learned a lot. We've created different a framework for our project. And so our hope is that districts can pick this up and use it to their advantage, create student leadership clubs for migrant students to feel like they belong, they feel heard, they feel like they have something to look forward to, because not all our students get, you know, to play sports. Not all our students, you know, are there for quite a bit of, you know, this whole school year. So while they're there, what are some things that we can do to help them build relationships? So really that's our hope. If we don't continue with the funding, we want to just be able to share what we've learned with other districts.
And I'm sure people are curious, is your conference open? Can people from the area go to it, or is it just for the folks in your area?
We've actually invited a few of our ESD partners throughout the state to join us, and as well as our Migrant OSPI team. So, I mean, if there's people that are interested in coming and kind of checking it out, let me know, and we can see if we can provide that for you. It is going to be here in Yakima at the Yakima Convention Center, but it's our first time doing it in person. So we're still, you know, we have a lot to do. And so, but we are open. If you're interested, let me know.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that planning a conference is so much work, and even like an virtual conference just adds a whole nother layer to it. Honestly, I think it's like having all of the links in the right place and materials and access and all of those things. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, virtually it was really fun. We got the kids a virtual DJ, so they got to dance while they were home, and we had some really great motivational speakers there. So the kids were really engaged. We did have a hard time with cameras when we started our leadership club, right? Kids didn't want to turn on their cameras, but at this event, they were like, oh, we're going to get some fun like incentives if we do certain things. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is like working with community partners to provide that some incentives. It could be a gift card, or, you know, a free cookie voucher, a free cheeseburger, whatever the case may be in your community. Is really reach out to those partners, because we couldn't have done a lot of what we do with our federal funds to do some of those really cool activities and give out prizes and things. So yeah, I just really encourage you to make those connections.
That's awesome. I mean, you talked a little bit about decision making, and like this is one of the things that I'm just curious about from my position at OSPI too. Like when we bring people together, I feel like a lot of the time we don't have like true co-design, and it sounds like you were walking kind of a fine line with facilitation, and providing choices within, you know, within reason, informed by, you know, the things that were going on. Can you talk a little bit more about how you designed your like decision-making process and what that looked like?
Yeah. Do you want me to share? Yeah. So a lot of we just thought, like, we kind of put ourselves in the student's shoes. What are some things that we can make easy and it's not too difficult for them to make decisions on, right? So we knew we needed a space. So we connected with a few community venues and, you know, gave them options so that it wasn't just one place and that's it. So we gave them a few options and the kids got to decide what they wanted. And they wanted to be in a conference setting. Some of these kids have never been to a conference. So I think that's why they chose the venue we chose. But we also worked in partnership with Heritage University in the past, where we would have an in-person celebration at the college outside during COVID. So it was all outside. And that was also a safe space for parents. They felt really open to being there. And it felt like a family gathering. Like we had dinner, we had fun activities, we had entertainment, and then we had a huge community resource fair. So it's really like, you know, every little step that we took around the conference, it's like, how can we make this easy for students to really make a decision on? And then really empowering them to say, no, I don't really care for that, or I don't really like this, because like we kept just kind of telling them, this is for you. This is about you and your peers. What is going to be the most meaningful? But we did in person, we did a lot of like, let's put up some ideas, you know, who wants to take notes, or where should we? So the team was able to have like sticky paper, you know, either notepads, things that they can just everywhere can use and just make those decisions. That they would get up, we put the music on, and they'd make those decisions right then and there. When it was Zoom, we would do polls or surveys, or just open up a conversation with them of what they thought.
Yeah, and I do want to share too that sometimes it's that balance too of like developing those leadership skills within our students. And like we mentioned before, it was 8th to 12th grade students. So some of these students are like just learning, like, well, what exactly does it mean for me to be in this committee? And we want to embrace their lived experiences, but then at the same time developing those skills. So like one example of where we gave them free range was on the logo. Like, you guys decide the logo, and we had them actually design their logo. They designed the t-shirts that are going to be used for the conference, and then they voted on like, oh yeah, these are the designs, and really showing them too, like, this is a process on how to, from start to finish, on all the little things that we have to think about when putting on a conference. And so them really seeing like, oh, we have to go out and get presenters, we have to go out and this is a process for getting the t-shirts. And so that's another thing too, like with them just making decisions, but also them seeing like, okay, let's think of the big picture. How is this going to affect everybody? Or even just on the food, right? Like for them, they might be like, maybe they've never been around people that have allergies, but then when another student can be like, oh, you know, I can't have dairy, so is there going to be an option for me? And then that's where like you can see the collaboration between them, like, and then learning like, oh yeah, we need to think about allergies, nut allergies, and dairy free and all of that from the students. Even just like, oh, we had pizza today, like, oh, can I have something that doesn't have cheese on it? So that going through that process with them too.
That's so cool. I mean, that sounds like very empowering for the students just to be able to, I don't know, like I think of like when like my kids were little and they would struggle, like you'd be like, hey, get dressed, you know, and like giving them like, you can wear this or you can wear this. Like which one, you know, like, and just making it an edible decision. I think that's such a cool move on your part. And just also like to put together a conference is such great work experience, because I think like moving into the professional world and looking at all of the many options for things like venue or t-shirts or like getting speakers and that kind of thing. I mean, that comes up in a lot of workplaces. So that's super cool that they were able to experience that, and I don't know, and get the feel of what it is to collaborate with other people, because I feel like that really is a great work skill also. Very cool. I want to talk to Lily too about her project. Lily, you've been working with family reconciliation, and your project is kind of centered on that. So can you tell us a little bit about your project and what the structure of it is as well?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So the origin kind of this project is essentially we were tasked by the Washington State Legislature. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families was tasked by the Washington State Legislature to create a community-based version of to contract with community-based providers for family reconciliation services. Folks on this call might be familiar with it via the BECA bill, right? That's a very common route into family reconciliation services, but this is when families are in crisis, right? This is supposed to be prevention services. And explicitly in that proviso that the Washington State Legislature, provided us with, said that we had to use co-design in creating this, right? So that actually was really helpful because for people who were like, why do we need to involve, these voices? It was very helpful just to be able to pull legislation and say, this is why, because our boss said so. Because the legislature in a lot of ways is our boss, right? Like if we're the governor's our boss, and so are the representatives and the people, right? And so if they're saying do it this way, we said okay. And they specifically asked us to really look at, so systems folks. So these are people who work in various systems that surround families and youth. So we have representatives from DSHS, OSPI, DCYS, right, and then other state agencies. Community folks, so these are community nonprofit providers, a lot of homeless and runaway youth provider type. Lived experts, so this included young people, this included parents, bio parents, foster parents, and guardians. And kind of we opened the door even further and we said anyone who has experienced family reconciliation services or would have benefited from that as well, because we know that right now the system is not exactly the most accessible. And then also making sure that we are working with the tribes as well, right? Because there's a lot of questions around, you know, where does ICWA start and where does ICWA, and especially when it comes to some of these prevention steps. So we're working very intentionally with the tribes on setting up kind of their own model that can be adapted to those specific needs as well, right? So that was kind of the and from that we started last year. We've been going almost a year now, and it's been really incredible working with these people to kind of create that community pathway for family reconciliation services. Yeah. I don't know if you want me to say more.
No, I'm just great. So I'm thinking about it like from the perspective of like a school leader, like I think when I'm looking to put together like a group of people, there's like your typical volunteers and you're looking to get people who aren't your typical volunteers. Can you talk a little bit about what the recruitment looked like and like how did you get people interested and willing to spend their time on your project?
Yeah. So big shout out to Sam and his team because they did a lot of the recruitment around that. But what we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, what should that recruitment look like? And one of the first things we talked about was like, what is compensation, right? So compensation is a huge recruitment tool. We fortunately did have money in that proviso to be able to pay people, but we also wanted to take it a step further. Because the money didn't necessarily have like restrictions on how it could be spent to support the project, we decided that a chunk of it can be used to address any barriers related to people being able to participate. So in addition to us saying, hey, not only are we going to pay you to be here, we are also going to take away any problems, y'all. We're not a magic wand, but if there's a barrier, come and talk to us, right? So that was also a really good recruitment tool. People genuinely want to help. People have been genuinely harmed by these systems and want to see justice done correctly. A lot of our community providers said, absolutely, we want to be a part of this from the inception because they have their own systemic barriers, right? So we did a lot of like very individual targeted, like, would you like to invitation type conversations with people. And then for systems folks, we said, you know, we all understand that there's families are multi-system, like, yes, they're involved in schools, but maybe they're also involved in DSHS. I know for myself growing up, like, yes, I went to school, but my family also received TANF. And we also had Section 8. And, you know, and that actually like had a lot of impact in how I showed up at the school, right? So there was a lot of like intentionality in thinking multi-system as well. Understanding that families, if you're thinking from a human-centered approach, that families will likely impact a multitude of places, and can we support this program from a multitude of places, right? So that was kind of our thinking around the recruitment piece. And then to be honest, I think Sydney and Claudia, you all had much more innovation and creativity opportunity to really give back to your co-designers, we had to be kind of prescriptive. We had to really define the boundaries of what it was we were there to do. That didn't mean that we didn't care about what was outside of those boundaries. That mean that we didn't want folks to like talk about their experience in a way that was whole, right? We just, when it came down to it, we had to be very like, this is what we're here, this is what we can change, and this is what we can't change, right? So once we were really clear, and this is that consent piece, that confidentiality piece, that informed consent piece, right?
Yeah.
Once we were really clear on that, then co-designers were able to really decide whether or not they wanted to participate, right? Because we weren't like, I think a lot of people have like experience with CPS that they're like, can we change this? And it's like, we can't in this space, but like, please talk about this if that's what you want to do, if you want to fill that space. So that was kind of the tension I think that we had. But overall, like, and then of course, the engagement and re-engagement, Sam's team is very focused on the follow-up, the aftercare, the prepping. We have lived experts have their own space before we go into the larger group, so that they kind of get a heads up on what it is we're going to be talking about, right? So that they feel like they have enough time to like really process kind of the information that's been given. And then we also do like pre and post follow-up with people individually. We have a designated healer who is really tasked with, going in and really working on the coping, because the space can be heavy, right? Like the reality is that young people who are in these systems or need family crisis often means that something happened that's hard. And so we can't ignore that reality either. So we decided to come prepared for that. And that really helped, I think, A, build the relationship, but B, really allowed people to feel like they could be whole in the space. And that immediately aided recruitment, right? Is really building the space. There was no surprises, basically.
That's cool that it was like intentionally planned in that way to be supportive and responsive. I know like sometimes, I think like part of our committee structures is that we don't always necessarily pay attention to like, this is like a potentially harmful topic, and how do we preemptively keep everybody feeling okay about it as we talk about it. I think one of the cool things that I've heard you and Sam talk about too is that like, because Sam is a contractor, he was able to do some things that you as a state entity weren't allowed to do, like providing funds for people to participate, and for just thinking about it in a different way. And I think like having like the third party, it seems like it was a real benefit to your project. Do you want to talk about your partnership a little bit?
Yeah, so that internal-external partnership is so critical, because frankly, state institutions are not here for the modern era, right? We're not here for the youth. And a lot of that really comes down to the way in which we choose to pay people. Like, we as an institution can't Venmo people, right? But Sam's team can. And so we saw a lot of really important accessibility that comes with the ability to contract externally, right? Whereas if we were doing state agency, like we just finally and internally at DCYF were like, hey, let's actually have the DocuSign, and I saw Peggy Lewis, and I know, big shout out to Peggy Lewis, because I know that she used to drive all around the state to get wet signatures to be able to pay people. And I just did not want to have to go there, right? And so that third party was a big help in terms of making sure people were not only paid, but paid in a way that was realistic to them and like more equitable to them, right? And then also the thing that I have limitations on as a state worker is I can't talk about the legislative process. Like I can't talk about what happens when I submit, I can talk about like a decision packet, like a funding process with our co-designers, but I can't talk about like, you know, what happens when it goes off and is now in the world of the legislative landscape, right? Because, you know, to be honest, that's outside of my scope. Like I'm not, but Sam can. So Sam really is able to like, and his team are able to really provide that holistic policy understanding to our co-designers. Whereas like I'm not able to like cross some bounds because of my positionality with the state, but because we also have that external partnership, our co-designers get a whole picture and I don't have to be secret squirrely with them. I can just defer to Sam, right? And that's been extraordinarily helpful because there are some things that happen internally, right, that it can impact process later on. And there are some things that happen legislatively that can impact process now. Like, for example, one of the things that we were tracking was, you know, the passing of 5599, right? And the stuff around LGBTQ plus young people, right? I couldn't really talk to our co-designers about that, but Sam could. And so now we feel like adequately prepped to incorporate some of those elements into the design that we're working on, right? Without having to kind of backtrack. So it's been extraordinarily helpful.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for like a team who wanted to start a co-design project? Are there things that you wish you'd done differently, or, you know?
Oh my gosh, so much. One, I think Beyond Sticky Notes has a really great, like, is your organization ready to do co-design questionnaire? So do that. I did not do that because again, I was told to do what I was told to do. But I would highly suggest if you're thinking about doing a co-design project to start there. And then two, I would allow yourself more time for planning. I was kind of brought in and then just started immediately, like second weekend, I was cold calling people, right? I wish I would have had at least like 6 months to a year to be able to really plan a project. And that is really to kind of help people understand why we're doing it this way versus doing it another way. And really kind of assembling that leadership team in a way that is really, really intentional. Like, I think we are really looking for opportunities for young people to be a part of that leadership. But if I had more planning time, I think it would have been so much more intentional. So those are kind of the two things I would really suggest, is like looking at that resource and then also really allowing and giving yourself some time to plan.
Yeah, planning time. I feel like that is so neglected in so much of our work at the state. And I feel that too. It's just like there's always kind of this like burning fire of like, we've only got 3 months or 6 months or this week, you know, like that kind of conversation is really everywhere. And how do we slow it down so that it's a really meaningful project and so that we can really get the voices of people that we want to be involved in the room? So I appreciate that so much, Lily. I'm glad that you brought voice to that. I'm curious what Cindy and Claudia think too. Like, do you have lessons learned or things that you think people should know about as they're kind of thinking about trying this process?
Yeah, no, I think that was a great addition, is like definitely start planning early. We started, I think, right at the beginning of the year. And so just being intentional about who are you targeting, and then you know, your overall goal. You know, our goal is to have this space and then, you know, ensure that our students feel like what's happening is meaningful to them. So one thing that we learned right away was like, we need to let kids know what is the migrant education program, because sometimes they too don't know what programs they're a part of because of, you know, their demographics, their background, you know, whatever it might be academically. So that was one of the key pieces, is let them know what this means, why it's important, and how we can support them, how their districts can support them too. So that way they feel, okay, I'm understanding this. Now I know I'm a part of this and why. But I think we also created, like, you know, norms that were meaningful for them too when we are in these spaces. So what is important to keep in mind, especially being respectful of others, being intentional, why we're doing this. And I think also one of the things that was really exciting for us and that we want to continue to do is, what being a part of this can create so many opportunities for your future. Like we have a few students that stand out that even though we didn't do the work like the districts did, that one-on-one support academically, we were able to support them with one of our kiddos not only got a Migrant state scholarship for her education and her academics, but she also got a national Migrant scholarship. And this young lady started in our leadership club, was really just like one of those kids that was a little shy, but then was like, I'm gonna push myself because I already know I need to put myself out there for my future. Like, what can I do? So she not only was like one of our leaders in the club, she also asked for support. So she connected with us. She's like, I want to apply to these colleges because I know that I need more support. So we did letters of recommendation for her because of her advocacy and leadership. And so she was awarded a full ride scholarship to Heritage University. Wow. And it's now, she's actually in school to be a teacher. And she also asked for a letter of reference for a para position in her district that she graduated from. So it was just so cool to see. And then we had another young lady too that was a part of it and is also attending the same college right now. And she even came on to be a mentor for one of our STEM camps that we did for the first time this year. And so just kind of creating those opportunities for students. So just letting them know that it doesn't stop here. Your leadership skills are going to take you, wherever you want to go. If it's graduating from high school, if it's opening your own business, whatever you want, we always tell them these are just small little pieces that'll help you get there, and we're here to support you. So
that's awesome. Well, let's give our panel a big round of applause and show them some love with our reaction buttons. What cool projects. And I know that as people are curious, definitely check in with our panel, and you can also email folks if you have questions going forward. Jocelyn, are there any questions in our Q&A? I think I see a hand raised. Just want to check.
There are no questions in the Q&A. I think people are just grateful to hear everybody's experiences.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are gonna go to this other part. So we hope that this webinar is helpful to you and that it inspires you to have some conversations. We want you to be able to discuss some ideas with leadership teams, with your PLCs, and maybe just make it a small step in a classroom. Talk to those students about what they want and explore what it could feel like, because I think it definitely does shift the power when students have voice and choice. We have some resources to share with you. We have an Engage newsletter. It's connected to these webinars. It has links for you. So if you want to take that quiz that Francesca was talking about at the beginning, and Lily as well, check out the quiz. It'll help you think about this process a little bit differently. There's a whole website for Beyond Sticky Notes that you can check out. And you can also connect with our staff or any of the panelists from today as well. Sam, did you want to talk through your resources on this page?
Yeah, just a couple other things that are very similar, of course, beyond sticky notes as well. And, credit to Lily, she also looked at design justice to be able to have an added layer of a justice and equity focus on the co-design work that we do as well too. And then some stuff from the civic design library and things like that. So a couple additional resources for folks to use as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check out design justice. That's great. So again, newsletter will be coming out every month, and each month we publish things that are we call it a care package. So if your leadership team is interested in our topic, there's activities in there to explore with them. There's also links to things like videos, and usually we have an article from our webinar headliner in there as well. Another reminder, please come back next August and join us for another school year of webinars. We are going to be talking about setting up your classroom and school for belonging in August. And if you don't catch the link here, it's on our webpage as well, and you'll be able to register there. I'm going to launch our evaluation. Is it launched? This stop sharing first. You have to stop sharing first. Okay. So there's evaluation for y'all. We do have a feedback survey that's linked in your email that'll come to you as a follow-up too, and it might even launch after we finish the webinar. So if you want to fill out the feedback survey, we use that to find speakers and ultimately to make our webinar better. So please give us some great ideas for the next year, and we will continue to improve. The last thing here is we'd love to see you get some clock hours for joining us. If you joined live, you registered for this last school year through Zoom, but you haven't registered for the next school year, so just know that. You'll also need to register for clock hours monthly in PD Enroller. PD Enroller is going to send you an evaluation in your email. We verify your attendance from our attendance reports. And then Ronnie Larson releases your clock hours. So if you're watching this video later, the process changes a little bit. You register each month for the clock hours and the PD Enroller still. And you complete the evaluation, and you'll also do our graduation equity feedback survey. And that'll just signal to us that you watch the videos. And then we verify your attendance every couple of weeks just by checking on that. And that's that. So if you have questions about this, you can email me and Ronnie. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us this school year. We can't wait for next year. We have some great ideas about some potential webinars coming up. And yeah, we will see you all in August. Have a great week and end of your school year.